And welcome to another episode of Steelers. I'm your host, as always, Tony Defio, and I thank you for joining me on this lovely, and when I say lovely, I mean incredibly cold Friday evening in Pittsburgh, PA. It's November 18th as I'm doing this podcast, and it's about 28 degrees outside. It feels like it's 20 degrees. It's crazy. It's insane. And if you've been a fan of my podcast for the last couple of years, you know how much I hate winter. So I certainly didn't want to see it arrive a month early. And hopefully it warms up to semi warm by next week or so, because I'm already over this cold weather. Not to complain. You don't come here to hear about that. But before I begin, I want to apologize for last week's show. I didn't realize how bad it was as far as the quality. I felt really good about the show. Like, oh man, I'm really doing well in this show. And then I went back and listened to it, and it was just one glitch after another because I had a poor internet connection. And I'm sorry that you all had to sit through that, whether you were watching it live or trying to listen to it after the fact. But tonight is a lot. Last week it was raining all day, and I'm sure that had a lot to do with the poor teams. Hopefully that stuff. All right. Before I continue with tonight's show, I just want to ask you, as I always do, to please like and subscribe to our Behind the Curtain YouTube channel. We bring you live shows each and every day and night, including this show, the Touchdown Under Show on Friday evenings at 5 p.m. We run the North with Kevin Tate. We have Steelers Preview on Thursdays with Jeff, Dave, and Brian. We have the Hangover on Monday with yours truly, Shannon White and Brian Anthony Davis. We have the Scobro Show on Tuesdays with Dave Schofield and Rich Schofield. And Wednesdays, we have Know Your Enemy with Jeffrey Benedict and Shannon. Of course, I mentioned the preview on Thursday. We have all those shows also live on Facebook. And, of course, you can catch all those shows after the fact on any audio platform of your choosing. Anywhere you can find podcasts, you can find Behind the Steel Curtain podcasting channel. And, of course, you can catch a lot of audio-only shows, exclusively audio. No live version, just audio only. You can catch those on any audio platform, including Let's Ride with Jeff Hartman, The War Room with Matty Peverall, The Steelers Fix with Jeremy Betts and Andrew Wilbar, What You's Talking About with Kyle Kreis, The State of the Steelers with Daniel J., Bad Language with Brian. Here we go to Steelers Show with Brian and KT Smith. Did I miss the Stat Geek with Dave Schofield? And I believe that covers them all. If not, like I said, go to Behind the Curtains podcasting channel, either on YouTube, on Facebook, or any audio platform, and you'll find any show you're looking for. We have so many of them. And, of course, check out Behind the Curtain, the website. We're bringing news, commentary, film breakdown. It's your one-stop shop for all your Steelers needs. All right. Let's check out who we have in the live chat. Kathy Ford was number one. She says, hello, fans. She has fans. She does have fans, too, Kathy Ford. George Teston, who's very excited to see me. Hello, George. Just me is with us tonight. Hello, me. Daredevil, always a regular. Welcome, Daredevil. Daniel Red, who says from Facebook, who says, welcome back, Tony. I was getting worried about you. Well, I had a family thing on Monday to deal with. So that was but everything went okay. So that's cool. So, but I was sorry to miss you guys because I wanted to talk about Sunday's game against the Saints. Mike C is with us. Deb Skovroski, I hope I said that right. Daniel J, State of the Steelers, is with us. Faustine Flores, Biggie Bronco. All right, let's get into it. Let's talk a little bit about last day's game against the Saints at Acrisure Stadium, a 20-10 win. And, it wasn't the prettiest game, but when was the last time the Steelers played a pretty game? But it was a good game. Obviously, it broke a 2-game losing streak. They were coming off a really bad loss to the Eagles before the bye. And the Saints, as compromised as they were coming into Acrisure Stadium last Sunday, as beat up as they were, as bad as they were themselves, I think they were 3-6 coming into that game. They were still a 1.5 point favorite. I saw them favored by as much as 3.5 last week. So Pittsburgh was still the underdog. And, I was watching The Hangover after the fact. I was watching it last Monday evening, and I had to laugh. Brian was interacting with somebody in a live chat, and they said, well, Pittsburgh won, but it was just the Saints. I'm like, here we go again. Steeler fans, we're equally, we're always worried that they're the worst team in the NFL, and then equally entitled. Like, look, yeah, it's just the Saints that they beat, but these are just the Steelers. These Steelers, if you haven't been paying attention, they're not very good. In fact, going into last week, they were in serious contention for the number 1 draft pick next year. So, let's put it in perspective. They beat the Saints, but the Saints weren't the lesser competition. In fact, Pittsburgh was, according to the odds makers. So that's the first thing I took away from that game is the idea that, well, it was only the Saints. That was the overall sentiment. Meanwhile, the Steelers had a worse record going in, and they were underdogs at home. So at this point, any win is golden, and you take them wherever you can get them, and you take them however you can get them. But what I liked about the game was, if you were to draw up a formula going into 2022 of how you wanted these Steelers, the first year without Big Ben as the quarterback, to win games, I think last Sunday's was about as close to that kind of formula as you're going to get. You wanted it to be a little prettier. You wanted it to be a little bit better on offense. But the sentiment going into 2022 was, the belief was that they could win with defense, or at least they could stay in games with their defense. But that had to be, the defense had to be effective. When I say effective, it had to be dynamic. It had to be opportunistic. It had to get after the quarterback. And we saw a lot of that, obviously, in week 1 in that win over the Bengals, that upset of the Bengals on the road in overtime. And that game, that win required every single ounce of effort from the defense. 7 sacks, 5 takeaways, a pick 6 by Minka Fitzpatrick, and that was the formula. The offense really did nothing in that game. If you think back, there were some plays here and there, especially at the end with Mitch Trubisky late in overtime. But really, that was all the defense, and to think that you were going to get that kind of an effort every week from the defense was not realistic. However, you did expect to have TJ Watt in there every week, and you lost him at the end of that first game, and they were without him for almost 2 months, or basically 2 months. So, that formula was shot, took a huge blow in week 1, or at the end of week 1, because you lost your best player overall, and certainly your best player on defense. So, that throughout the dynamic part when it came to the defense, the opportunistic part when it came to the defense. We've been over this several times. They had some nice moments holding teams under, a certain point total, games against the Patriots, for example, the Dolphins, the Buccaneers. Of course, they won that game. Those were some examples of the defense, quote unquote, doing just enough to win, or doing enough to win in the eyes of many. But really, as far as being able to take the football away, sack the quarterback, affect the game, change the game, do something to help win the game, besides just being a stout defense, you rarely saw that without TJ Watt. But last week against the Saints, you saw that again. Not to the extent that you did against the Bengals, but you saw it again with TJ Watt back in there. He drew so much attention, obviously. He didn't have a great day stat-wise, but he was a presence. There was no question that the Saints were paying attention to TJ Watt. And Alex Highsmith, who had 3 sacks in week 1, had 2, the only 2 sacks for Pittsburgh last week. He had those 2 sacks. So clearly it made a difference for him. He played a great game. The front 7 in general was fantastic. What, they had 29 yards against the run. They held the Saints to 29 yards on the ground, 186 yards total. And they had 2 takeaways. One by Demontae Kazee early in the fourth quarter that led to a touchdown, and one late in the game by Levi Wallace, who I've been admittedly highly critical of this year, but he played a great game last week, and that pretty much put the game away with about 4:23 left in the fourth quarter. So TJ Watt's presence made a big impact last week, and that defense played pretty much like it did in week 1. It wasn't just stout, but it was dynamic and opportunistic. So that was the formula. And as far as the offense, again, it wasn't pretty. There's still a lot of work to be done. There were a lot of plays I felt that were left out on the field, but they did rush for 217 yards. Best rushing performance by this team in a long time. Najee Harris, 20 carries, 99 yards. The best he's looked in a long time. Jaylen Warren got in on the act. 37 yards on 9 carries, another 40 yards on 3 catches. He looked like a great complementary piece, a great role player in the backfield. The question is, are they going to do a running back by committee approach moving forward? I don't know. And I wouldn't call what they did last week as necessarily a running back by committee. It's never going to be a 50-50 thing. Well, first of all, as long as Najee Harris or any running back of that pedigree is the starter, and number 2, as long as Mike Tomlin's the head coach, I find it hard to believe that he's just suddenly going to go to that kind of an attack. But it is worth pointing out that the Steelers have had, despite the fact that Mike Tomlin likes to run his running backs, his starters, until the wheels fall off, famously starting with Willie Parker in 2007. It is worth noting that backup running backs, even under Mike Tomlin, have had roles in the offense over the years. It's not just been one guy doing everything. It was that kind of with Le'Veon Bell, maybe 2014 through 2016. But overall, you had backup running backs fill specific roles for the offense. It wasn't just one guy in there getting 400 touches a year. Last year it was with Najee Harris, and many times it was with Le'Veon Bell. But overall, you have seen some backup running backs come up with some key moments and key plays. Isaac Redman comes to mind. Who was the running back in 2008 that really saved their bacon? He was a great veteran. He filled in for Willie Parker when he was injured. He picked up that awesome, very important third down in that overtime win against the Ravens. He was a great veteran. I always forget his name. I always forget that guy's name. And he played for the Vikings earlier in his career, but just a really important veteran role player. Help me out, live chat. Who was that? At any rate, Mewade Moore. That's it. Mewade Moore. Great role player for them. Great backup. Wasn't necessarily a running back by committee, but he was a valuable weapon for them. So there is precedent when it comes. Yeah, thank you, Faustino. Noel Daymore. Thank you, George Tesson. There is precedent when it comes to this to backup running backs having a role in the Steelers offense, and I certainly think Jaylen Warren can do that for Pittsburgh. We saw that on Sunday. We've seen it a few times, throughout the season, and I think he deserves a bigger role in this offense. Not a equal role to Najee Harris. I still think he's an important franchise type player for them if he can reach his potential. But certainly he deserves a bigger role moving forward. If it's similar to what we saw on Sunday against the Saints, that's great because that was very effective, and he was a great closer. I think. I mean, he made some important plays in the touchdown at the end to make it 20-10, and he closed the game out with a first down run on 3rd and short with less than 2 minutes left. So if that's what you can get from Jaylen Warren every week moving forward, that'd be fantastic, especially if Najee Harris continues to run like he did against the Saints. And it was a great day for him, mainly not because of necessarily the yardage. All of that was fantastic, just under 5 yards per carry, but the fact that he was decisive, he hit the hole, he ran hard, he was hard to bring. I mean, how many times did they blow the whistle and he was still on his feet? It was like he wanted to show the whole world that, look, I'm not a bust. I'm not. You don't have to worry about me. I'm still the top guy here in the backfield. So it was great to see by Najee Harris, and it was a great performance by the line in terms of opening holes for the running game. Now, it wasn't necessarily great as far as protecting Kenny Pickett, but I heard a stat from PFF that 3 of the sacks were on the line. To back up a bit, Pickett was sacked 6 times. 3 of them, evidently, according to PFF, were the responsibility of the line, and 3 of them were on Pickett. I don't know what to make of that. Pro Football Focus is a very polarizing site, and like I always say, they're correct as long as you believe them, as long as you accept the stats and the grades. If you don't accept them, then they're a joke. That's just how PFF is viewed by a lot of football fans. So it was a great game, and there were a lot of positives to take out of that. And I think if the defense can continue to be dynamic and opportunistic, and the offense can continue to have a sound ground attack, then that might be a formula that they can work with over these next 8 games, and maybe sort of get back into the race. We'll see. It seems like a long shot still at this point. Pittsburgh obviously has a lot of work to do to really become a contender again, but Sunday was a great step in the right direction. And before I get into anything else, I want to talk about Demontae Kazee and the impact that he had on Sunday's game. In case you're not aware, I'm sure you have to be if you're listening to a Steeler podcast or watching me live right now. Micah Fitzpatrick was a scratch because he had appendicitis, so obviously he couldn't play in Sunday's game. And Kazee made his 2022 debut, and he was a sensation. I mean, he was every bit as effective as Fitzpatrick looked in week 1, really, I shouldn't say week 1 because he was really just awesome in week 1, Fitzpatrick, but because he was as effective as Fitzpatrick has been at various points this year. He had the interception, a lot of big hits, wasn't afraid to play the run, wasn't afraid to stick his nose in there. He was called for a flagrant hit near the end of the first half on Olave, the rookie receiver. And to me, that was kind of questionable, as whether or not it should have been a a hit against a defenseless receiver. I can see why they would call it, but if you look at the replay, it was almost a clean hit. He kind of tried to lead with his forearms instead of his helmet, but whatever. I can see why they called it. But nevertheless, it was a great game by Kazee, and really, what a fantastic pickup by Pittsburgh in the offseason. When they signed him on May 3rd, because it was May 3rd, I didn't really think much of it. This is almost 2 months after the free agent frenzy in March, and I just figured he was just some guy that they signed, and I really didn't pay much attention to him. I'm not going to lie. I didn't really pay a whole lot of attention to Demontae Kazee all throughout the offseason, but so many of my behind store curtain colleagues and other football fans and experts, they kept praising the signing. And, as training camp evolved and watching him in the preseason, I began to learn a lot about the guy, and I can't believe that they were able to get him for a 1-year deal. I can't believe he wasn't in more demand. We're talking about somebody who started 49 games before coming to Pittsburgh. Since I think he was a 5th round pick in 2017 by the Falcons, became a full-time starter for them in his second year. He would have started even more games, but he suffered an Achilles injury early in the 2020 season that caused him to miss all but 4 games. And he signed with Dallas last year and was a full-time starter for them. I think he started 15 games. So a guy, 49 starts, and you get a guy like that to come here and be a role player. And, there was a lot of talk in the summer of him being part of a 3-safety package alongside Fitzpatrick and Terrell Edmonds. And watching Kazee play in the preseason, I mean, that was an exciting possibility. And then, unfortunately, he got hurt in the last preseason game against the Lions and had to go on IR. And it just really, when you see how effective that defense was last week with Watt in there, with Kazee back, and without Fitzpatrick, it just makes you ask, what could have been? I talked about the formula for success for this team coming into the year. Imagine if this defense was mostly healthy all year. You had Watt especially in there, and then you had Fitzpatrick and Kazee in there in the backfield, and they're able to utilize those guys, those 3 safeties. Because these safeties. Now that I've seen how Kazee plays, and we know about Fitzpatrick, and I think Edmonds is finally starting to get his due as a really quality, strong safety in the NFL. That's a strength for them. The safety position's a strength, and there's no doubt that they were going to utilize those 3 guys from week 1, and they're certainly going to over the final 2 months. So what could have been for this defense, for this team, with Watt in there all year and Fitzpatrick and Kazee back there alongside Edmonds, wreaking havoc in the secondary. I'm not saying that they would have been a contender, because I don't think that's true, but instead of 3-6 right now, maybe we're talking about a 5-4 football team and somebody who's in contention for at least a wild card spot with 8 games to go. So it's a shame that everything happened the way it did, starting in that last preseason game and through week 1 with the loss to Watt. The offense has never been able to get on track really, but I think we kind of expected that. We hoped for more, but I think we kind of expected that the offense would struggle all year and that the defense would have to prop the team up. But, the defense was compromised right from the very beginning, and we never really got to see that. So it'll be interesting to see what we see moving forward with this defense and with this team in general over the final 2 months. And on that note, at the 24:30 mark, I will take a small break and allow you to hear a word from our sponsors. And welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to the Friday Night Six Pack. I'm your host, Tony Defio, and thank you for sticking with me. And I ended the first half of the show talking about the impact that TJ Watt's absence and Kazee's absence and what that did to the defense in the first half of the year. And I wrote an article about TJ Watt on Sunday before, kind of like a preview, a primer for the game. And I got a lot of negative feedback on that. And I'm not surprised because people, I'm not trying to be insulting, but people just don't really like to engage in critical thinking a whole lot. And the article was about whether or not TJ Watt is worth an $80 million guaranteed investment by the Steelers. And everybody said, "Oh, it's a stupid article, dumb. This guy's all clickbait. Of course he's worth it." But I never said that Watt didn't deserve to make $80 million. Clearly, he's an $80 million a year player, or $80 million a year. Wow, that'll be soon with the quarterbacks. He's an $80 million player, guaranteed money. There's no doubt about it. He proved that last year. He's been proving that since his rookie year. The guy's a stud. He's arguably the best defensive player in the NFL, if not number one, certainly in the top two, behind the legendary Aaron Donald. But that's neither here nor there. Clearly, Watt is deserving of the contract he signed. When you talk about what the top defenders in the NFL are making, then he's definitely deserving. But the question I posed was, is he worth that to the Steelers? Meaning, is he that much of a difference maker that they have to pay that guy that kind of money to keep him around? And maybe the way that defense looked last week with him in there, maybe it is going to be a wise investment for them, as far as him being a difference maker for them, him elevating them 2 or 3 notches, and putting him on his back and carrying them and making them a better team than they otherwise would be. And to me, that was what the point I was trying to make, because one of the most famous lines quoted in sports history, evidently, was by the Pittsburgh Pirates ownership, when Ralph Kiner, the home run hitting legend, who I think he led the National League in home runs for so many years in a row as a member of the Pirates, and they were in last place so many years in a row, despite of that. And he asked for a raise. Remember back in the 50s and 40s and 50s and up through the 70s, there wasn't free agency in baseball, and Kiner, had to kind of ask for a raise. And the owner, the GM, whoever told him, "Look, we finished in last place with you. We can finish in last place without you." And that was kind of the point I was trying to make. Yes, TJ Watt's a fantastic player, probably going to go in the Hall of Fame if he keeps up this pace, this level of play that he's on. But is he worth it to the Steelers to pay him that kind of money? And he proved it in week 1, how he elevated that defense and kind of willed them to a win over the Bengals. And he proved it again last week by being such a focal point of the Saints that it made the defense that much better, and they limited them to under 200 yards total offense. So right now, I would say, yes, he is worth the investment. So that's really all I was trying to say. I wasn't trying to say, oh, TJ Watt doesn't deserve $80 million. People were really, really defensive. I get it. A lot of people just read the headline. And even if they do manage to read the article, they still interpret it differently than I intended. But that's kind of what I was going for anyway. I like to be provocative, but it's an interesting, it really is an interesting question because that's going to be the how you have to do business moving forward, as we've discussed many times in the past. Guaranteed money is the thing now, and with every case that comes up, whether it's Watt, this year it was Fitzpatrick, who knows who it's going to be in the future. It might someday be Kenny Pickett. You don't know. Hopefully they have to make a tough decision on him. That means he's really good. You're going to have to ask yourself, do we want to guarantee this kind of money to this guy, whoever that guy may be? And, I think we're seeing it this year. What's been the old, the mantra. I've said it, you can't win without a franchise quarterback, and you do whatever you can to keep that guy until he's washed up. That's basically what they did with Ben Roethlisberger. That's what a lot of teams do. But you see how these salaries are now, what these quarterbacks are commanding, and look what the Packers had to pay Aaron Rodgers this past offseason. And the Packers, they just look horrible. Thursday night they got beat at home by the Titans. The Titans are a good team, but after the way the Packers looked last week against the Cowboys in a win, you thought, okay, the Packers are maybe going to try to make a run now. Well, now they're 4-7, and they just look like they're ready to lay down and play dead somewhere, and the Packers had to get rid of Demontae Adams because, first of all, he wanted the big contract, and they were devoting so much of their salary cap space to the new contract that they gave Aaron Rodgers. And, is that going to be worth it for teams, moving forward? If a quarterback gets to a certain age, regardless of how good he is a team going to want to invest that kind of money in him? Or are they just going to want to start over and hope to get lucky with a younger quarterback? It's an interesting dilemma because it doesn't seem like these quarterback contracts are getting any smaller. It's not going to slow down as far as what these guys want. 10 years ago, $20 million was the going rate for the top guys. Now, 45, 50 million, 60 million, probably not before long. So, and you look at Russell Wilson, who was another guy along with Rodgers, who some Steeler fans wanted them to get, and the Broncos traded for him, and they gave him a new deal, and they're struggling. So, it's going to be interesting to see what happens with these quarterback contracts moving forward and how they affect teams, and if they really start to really limit them after a certain amount of time. The Chiefs just signed Mahomes, the Bills just signed Josh Allen, the Cowboys just signed Dak Prescott. They're all doing well. But what's going to happen 2 or 3 years from now, when these contracts really start to kick in? Is it you saw what the Chiefs had to do? They had to trade Tyreek Hill. So it's something worth keeping an eye on. So, all right, now one last thing. This Sunday's game against the Bengals at Acrisure Stadium. It's a big one for the Steelers. It's a very big game because, first of all, they're 3-6. That goes without saying. But they've lost 5 games in the AFC. So how many more games can they lose in the conference before they're just really just all but dead in the playoff picture? But the Bengals are they're going to be wanting to win this game too. This is a big game for them as well. They're 5-4. They've rebounded nicely after starting out 0-2. They won 5 of their last 7. They look like they're getting back to being the team that they were last year when they made it to the Super Bowl and almost won it. But they're 0-3 in the division. They probably can't afford to go 0-4 because the head-to-head tiebreaker against the Ravens would be out. The Ravens are the best team they're leading the division right now. So the head-to-head would be out. And at 0-4, certainly the second tiebreaker in the AFC North, the overall record in the division would be out, I would imagine, because they could be no better than 2-4. So it's a big game for the Bengals. So both teams are going to be almost, I'd say, treating it like a playoff game. The Bengals have a lot more, even at 0-4 in the division, they could still, find a way to make it into the playoffs. But Pittsburgh at 3-7 and 1-5 in the conference. That would be almost impossible to come back from. So this is huge. The question is, how can Pittsburgh win this game? And I think just like in week 1, I talked about this in my podcast the Friday before the week 1 game. The matchup to keep an eye on, now that TJ Watt is back, is Pittsburgh's pass rush versus the Bengals' offensive line. And the Bengals, despite overhauling their offensive line in the offseason, they've given up 32 sacks through 9 games, which is what? They're on pace for roughly 60. That's a lot of sacks. For Joe Burrow, even though he's a great athlete and he's young, he just suffered a knee injury, ACL, torn ACL 2 years ago. So that's a lot of wear and tear on that body already. So you saw what they did to him in week 1. They pressured him all game. They forced him into several mistakes. He did not look like your typical Joe Cole Burrow, So to me, that's the key to this game. Because let's be real. As far as the offenses are concerned, the Bengals are probably 3 or 4 levels above Pittsburgh right now. I mean, Burrow's, he's as far as his development, he's 2 years ahead of Kenny Pickett. And of course, he's already accomplished so much. And he has, he does. Yeah, you could say what you want about the Steelers' weapons, but until they prove it by going out there and being explosive and productive, the Bengals have the better skill players. And yes, Jamar Chase is out, and that's going to be a big problem for the Bengals. But Joe Mixon's a fantastic running back. He has 585 yards. T. Higgins is more than capable of being a number 1 receiver. And of course, Tyler Boyd is a very dependable number 2. So, as far as offense versus offense, the Bengals have the advantage. So it comes down to the Steelers' defense, mainly the pass rush, dominating the Bengals' offensive line and forcing Burrow into more mistakes. Probably not 5 turnovers like in week 1, but certainly enough to alter the game. That has to be where they win this game. They have to find a way to dominate the Bengals' offensive line. And, of course, they have to find a way to neutralize Joe Mixon like they did in week 1. They held him to 82 yards and 27 carries. Seemed like Minkah Fitzpatrick went out of his way to make it a personal grudge match. So you're going to need that kind of intensity again this week. So that's how it starts. And then whatever opportunities the defense provides the offense, they have to take advantage of it. And quite frankly, I look for this to be a close game again. And I think it's going to go into overtime again. And I think Pittsburgh's going to win. It just feels like, I know I said this before the Dolphins game, but it just seems like this is the kind of game that they're going to win and improve the 4-6. And with all these quote unquote lesser competition on the horizon, even though the Steelers are the lesser competition right now, it's gonna create some buzz going into the final 7 weeks. So those are my thoughts. Neutralize Joe Mixon, terrorize Joe Burrow, and create some opportunities for the offense. And the offense has to take advantage and win a close game in overtime. So those are my thoughts. And on that note, I will open things up to some questions and comments. And here's one to start things off. Cruiser from when she says of the game, Jamar Chase flipping off Minkah makes it personal. Well, I mean, Minkah was making a lot of things personal that day. I mean, he was really talking trash, and believe me, that middle finger by Jamar Chase didn't come out of nowhere. That was induced by Minkah Fitzpatrick. So, but yeah, I mean, that does make it fun. All right. And this one from Claude Bishop, who says, making the playoffs gives your young guys experience and anything can happen. Yeah, but I mean, of course, they have a long way to go at this point to even be in that discussion. I think ESPN's at playoff tier right now, and they had like 7 tiers, and they put Pittsburgh in the 7th tier with the caption, get ready for the draft or something like that. So, I mean, there's obviously a lot of work to do. But yeah, if they can win this game, then we can start dreaming again about the playoffs, I think. If they lose, then I think it's time to call in the priest and have him on standby. All right, what else we have here? Let's see. This is one. Well, I don't know. I have to get some context here. This one is a rebuttal to Claude Bishop. And Steeler Freak says, for me, making the playoffs just to get beat badly means nothing. Draft picks are more important than meaningless bragging rights. Well, I mean, big picture, yeah, it's probably good for them to have a bad year, but they're not going to try to have a bad year. So they're going to try to make the playoffs if they can. And Mark Malone says the Bengals must go down. I mean, he had his share of battles against the Bengals in the 80s, so he would know. He's familiar with that then AFC Central rivalry. And here's another from Claude Bishop, who I need some context on this, Claude, or I need you to clear this up. He said, Tony, they're going to win the division. Is that Pittsburgh or Cincinnati? Because if it's Cincinnati, I would tend to agree with you. If it's Pittsburgh, well, that's a long. They have a lot of work to do. Randy Wagner, as a follow up to my thoughts on specifically quarterback salaries, but salaries in general. When it comes to what Pittsburgh had to give T.J. Watt, $80 million, with a lot of offensive linemen are getting, receivers, cornerbacks, etc. And he says salaries are ridiculous. I don't know why I'm still an NFL fan. Many Americans are so struggling. Well, really, Randy, and I thank you for the comment. Relative to the rest of society, sports athletes have always made a ton of money. I mean, even back in the day when these guys had to have part-time jobs, they were still making more than your average citizen. So it's just, I'm not saying it's not crazier now than it was, say, in the 70s, in the 80s, but relative to the rest of society, they've always been outrageous. But hey, look, we always focus on the salaries that these guys make, but nobody ever talks about, the money that the owners make. I mean, they're worth billions. So, and another thing I find funny about that is how much we enjoy movies and TV shows, and these some of the top actors, a lot of them, they command 20, 30, 40 million a year, or per movie, I should say. Nobody blinks. So I mean, to me, I wouldn't let that ruin the enjoyment. It's no different than watching your favorite actor in the movie, and they're making 40 million a year. Is that, or 40 million for that movie? Is that going to ruin your enjoyment? It's like just because I know we all grew up playing sports, but just because we grew up playing sports doesn't mean we can really relate to these athletes as far as, they're doing something we would do. They're not really doing, they're doing something we would do, but they're doing it 20, 30, 40 times better. So, they're all they're simply doing is getting paid what the market will bear. And there's nothing wrong with that. So I wouldn't let that ruin your enjoyment of sports. I mean, it's you can divorce what they make from your enjoyment of it, because at the end of the day, the Steelers or whatever other team you root for, they're always going to be there, and they're always going to be your team well after these players have moved on with their lives, with their life's work. So, all right. Let's see what Biggie. Let's see what Biggie Brooks says. He always brings it with the opinions in the comments. And he said earlier, not for the last 3 or 4 years. I say the last 2 years, and Donald was before that, and before that it was Von Miller. So you're talking about who's been the best defensive player over the last 5 years? Yeah, well, I mean, come on, Aaron Donald's been just an absolute beast for going on a decade. Von Miller has had his time, and he's still a very effective player for the Bills. So yeah, not just T.J. Watt. I mean, T.J. Watt's not head and shoulders above any other defensive player. There are a lot of good ones out there. All right, moving on back down the live chat here. I thought I saw something about T.J. Watt and Joe Burrow. Here's another from Randy Wagner, and he says, "I know what I'm going to hate if the Steelers go 500 this year, and hearing how great the head coach is for never having a losing season. Well, they can't go 500 this year, not unless they have a tie. But if they get to around 500 at this point, I mean, to me that would speak well of Mike Tomlin's abilities to keep the team together and keep it in contention, which is something he's been able to do for the last 16 years now. So, I mean, your first year without Ben, if you can remain in contention, given their deficiencies, which are on both sides of the ball, even on defense, and doing it with a rookie quarterback, to me that would bode well for the future. Like I've been saying, and I know nobody wants to hear it. Nobody's ever going to agree with me, or few people are going to ever agree with me. But what the Steelers did in the 2010s, following their loss to the Packers in Super Bowl 40, what they did over the next 10 years or so to stay relevant, to stay competitive by and large, that's rare in sports. Usually a team just falls off for a period of time after that kind of a Super Bowl run where you make 3 in 6 years. They fall off, and lots of people get fired, but yet they remain relevant. And that's, to me, that speaks to, obviously it speaks to Ben Roethlisberger and the organization as a whole, but you have to credit Mike Tomlin for that, because it could have very easily gotten bad, and it looked like it was going to get bad in 2012 and 2013, especially 2013, and they almost made the playoffs. So, I know Tomlin's a polarizing figure, and quite frankly, he's been that since far too early in his career for my liking. But he's not going anywhere. He's just not anytime soon. So that's another thing people have to divorce themselves from. Their desire to see Mike Tomlin get fired, because it's not going to happen, at least not right now. And it's not that he has a job for life, because that's just a joke. I don't know why people say that. There's no precedent for that, but he certainly is not going to be fired anytime soon. So no matter how many times we talk about it, it's not going to happen. And this one from 13 Aaron T. What stat line from Kenny would make you say he's the guy of the future? Quite frankly, nothing right now. Nothing. All of his positive qualities have been, intangibles mostly. I mean, he's made some fantastic throws, but it's also been 6 games or whatever it's been, so he hasn't had that it moment yet, or that it game, but he's gaining valuable experience. And now the question is, how is he going to parlay that experience into his future as an NFL quarterback? This is from Aaron here. It's a great example of people just not realizing, quite frankly, what it takes to become a quarterback in the NFL. Like I said before, not everybody's Dan Marino. Not everybody just steps right in and is a future Hall of Famer from day one. It takes time for most of these guys, and there's a lot of growing up and growing pains to go through before you finally get it. We saw it with Josh Allen. We saw it with Jalen Hurts. We see with so many of these guys. Peyton Manning, Eli Manning. It's rare for a guy to come in and dominate in his first year, especially when he's on a team that's, quite frankly, bad, which the Steelers are right now. If you plop Kenny Pickett onto that 2004 Steeler team with a number 1 defense, number 1 rushing attack, this great veteran team laden with talent, he probably has, and we're praising, we're singing his praises, and we're calling him the savior. But unfortunately, his plight is similar to the vast majority of rookie quarterbacks that are thrown in as starters in their first season. They struggle. They look like they're going to be busts. They look like it's hard to find anything good to say about them. but a lot of them do turn it around and have good careers. So, all right. On that note, I think I'm going to call it a night. You guys were great to talk to tonight. I hope you enjoyed that game on Sunday. Now, remember, it was flexed out of the Sunday night game, and it's going to be at 4:25. So it's not a primetime game. So hopefully it doesn't affect your viewing of it very much. But until I talk to you on Monday on the hangover, you have a great weekend. And you guys are fantastic. You're great. I always look forward to Friday night, and I can't wait to talk to you again. Take care.